Hello everyone, it is I, the Witch of Paint, here with the last Zodiac fairy of this month before we move on to Christmas content this year. The actual last Zodiac fairy is coming in January, but this is the last of November. Today we are going to be painting a fairy based on the Zodiac Sagittarius. Sagittarius? One of those. The zodiac that is represented usually by a centaur with a bow and arrow. In German it is called Schütze, which refers to the fact that this constellation is an archer. It goes on from around November 22nd until December 21st, more or less. It's ruled by the planet Jupiter, which shall be put in the background of this painting. As for the fairy, she was basically going to be a centaur with wings. Can we spend a moment here to talk about centaur anatomy? Like, she has technically got 6 legs, if we consider that human arms used to be legs back before we evolved into bipedal human beings. And now she's also got wings. Does this make her kind of like an insect? I mean, technically it's not, since she doesn't have an exoskeleton, though I guess one never knows. That would have been an interesting way to take this, but perhaps I should not be thinking about this all too much. Yeah, let's move on. I've already forgotten most of the things I did while colouring the fairy in. Even if I was referencing my swatch card, there was just a lot of things going on at once that I was working on and kept switching between and everything, so I didn't keep particularly good track of it. Let's keep it at that. In the concept sketch, her horse body was facing more towards the left, while she had her body, like the human body, turned towards the right to shoot. However, thanks to the background I ended up choosing, or rather the reference I had for this background, I had to kind of mirror her so that the horse body faced towards the right and her human body was turned backwards, shooting towards the left of the painting. Honestly made me struggle a lot more than I necessarily had to. I should have planned this out better now that I have done this once before, but at the time I wasn't thinking about the potential problems that having to mirror a drawing would come with. Anyway, the background I chose was based on a picture I took when I was down in the Burren. There was a spot with lots of these rocks with gaps between them, kind of like Malham in England, where I've also been before. A really cool place. I figured if I scaled it right, I would make one of these gaps look like a proper canyon, which, did work, where I left out the plants that grew in between the gaps, as that would have made everything look a little odd and made the centaur fairy look smaller than she was supposed to be looking, so I left out the plants altogether so that it doesn't look weird. The fairy does, of course, get a bow and arrows, though after struggling with the pose for so long, I almost forget to make it look a little special. But I remember it in time, so don't worry about the bow. Looking into some of these articles, as well as images on, search engine, it seems I have missed a few stars on the left that go down a little when I was drawing the constellation. Apologies for that, I wasn't aware of it at the time of painting the image itself. I only realised later that there's more stars to the constellation than I originally thought there would be. Now, on to the myth behind Sagittarius itself. Or rather, the myths. As mentioned before, the constellation represents a centaur with a bow and arrow shooting across the sky. Though if one of the articles is to be believed, the brightest stars form a teapot, with the steam coming out of it being the Milky Way. Gotta say that is a very nice interpretation. I do love me some magical star tea. I bet it helps you sleep really well. Anyway, let's focus on the archer interpretation. As much as I would love to talk about tea here, the Greeks didn't see it as a teapot, sadly. They saw it as a centaur. The arrow is pointing at the heart of Scorpio in order to avenge Orion's death. Good to know Orion has some support up there. Well, either the constellation is avenging Orion, or it is actually protecting Hercules, which is a constellation that's close to Scorpio. As to who the centaur is exactly, well, some would say it is Chiron, but then there is also a second centaur in the sky. The constellation is known as Centaurus, so sometimes that one is seen as Chiron. So all in all, people are not sure who is who here. For those who do not know who Chiron is, or I guess Chiron, I've used 2 different pronunciations, I'm sorry. Chiron anyway. He's a mythological figure that helped train some of the heroes within Greek mythology. He's kinda like a mentor guy in the story, and he's been training heroes like Asclepius, who later became god of medicine, Achilles, who had the whole thing going on with his heel being his only weak spot and stuff, and Jason, who laid the Argonauts on the trip to get the Golden Fleece, and many more heroes. He is a really famous teacher back in the day, and probably was one of the only centaurs that wasn't completely mad and drunk all the time. He was a real proper, good guy. Then a different possible myth connecting to Sagittarius is the one about Satyr Crotus, son of Pan, who is credited with inventing archery, which seems a bit weird to me because Apollo is the god of archery, but so is Artemis. She's also got a bow. But I guess they didn't invent it, the 2 of them. Anyways, this satyr, Crotus, was said to ride on horseback, and I can't help but wonder if at some point in human history we literally just decided one day to just merge horse riders with their steeds. Like, how did centaurs become a thing? I kind of want to look into that. I want to know what happened. Why did we merge human bodies with horse bodies? Who came up with this? And why do we merge human bodies with anything? Like, satyrs are humans with goat legs, and possibly also horns and a goatee, which is kind of cute. Or why did we merge humans with fishtails to make mermaids? I'm probably asking unnecessary questions, but I need to dig deeper into this eventually. Not now, I'm not ready for that rabbit hole yet. Moving on. I also want to talk about something else that is interesting about the star signs mythology that isn't from the Greeks, namely the Babylonians, who depicted the star sign as a centaur with wings. It is literally my fairy, well, sort of. The god Nergal, who is this constellation, is usually depicted with 2 heads, one of which isn't even human, it's a panther head. And then he's also got a scorpion stinger above his horse tail. It's a very weird but also kind of fun combo of body parts, but also kind of scary. I would not want to cross paths with this guy ever, I think, just based on the way that he's depicted. Now on to talking about the fairy herself. As I have mentioned, this sketch was a pain to do, and I even had to go back in and correct her torso so that it matched better than before, and then I had to start outlining. The outline wasn't that hard. The sketch was really one of the hardest bits of this painting overall, mainly because horses have weird bodies and humans have weird bodies. We've got weird limbs, and horses' legs have bumps in certain places, and there's muscles you've got to consider. And I mean, I have drawn a lot of horses in my lifetime. It used to be one of my favourite things to draw when I was a little kiddo. Just imagine me, a little kiddo, in front of a piece of paper trying to draw horses. They weren't great horses back then, but I am getting very good at them by now, if I do say so myself. But this is not just horse, it's also human, and humans also have hands. They don't just have hooves and certain bumps in certain areas that you could just remember. They've got hands, and you gotta remember how to draw them. I mean, I used a reference for the archery pose, but because I had her facing the other way than the horse body, I kind of struggled to make it look like she was turning back as well. It was all a bit of a mess in my head. But after all that, most of the rest of the painting was very easy. As per usual, I began with mapping everything out in blue colours, since this is a nighttime painting and everything has to be dark. Around her hair and tail though, I dropped some lemon yellow in the first layer in order to remind myself that since her hair was going to be made of fire, it will not be the light source that's going to be affecting my character the most. I mean, there's also Jupiter in the background, which I kind of kept in mind as kind of casting a little bit of light because it's reflecting some light back at you, but most of the light comes from the fire because that's the closest thing to her. I promptly also forget, though, that it may also affect the rocks on the other side of her in the painting. So for a great deal of this, I just sprayed the background completely blue without considering the way that the light affects some of the rock areas. Furthermore, I decided that the centaur would mostly be coloured in reds, yellows and oranges, while the background around her would be drawn in blues and grey tones, except for the planet Jupiter, because it isn't blue, as many of you may or may not know. It is mostly oranges and different shades of brown, so pretty much the same kind of colour palette I had planned for this fairy. I'll tell you why I chose to make them two different colours, mostly because I kind of wanted the fairy to stand out, and I thought if I made her bright and yellow and red and orange, then she would stand out from the dark blue background around her. That really worked. Like, it looks really cool in the end. I struggled a little with the background because I didn't outline it, so I had to rely solely on my ability to show shapes with shadows in the rocks, and also keeping Jupiter from being blue. That was something. Although from further away it looks just kind of like it should. I struggled looking at it up close while painting, because to me it just looks like dark blob, light blob, less dark blob, kind of dark blob. You know what I mean? Lots of blobs. That's kind of what it looked like to me. And I wasn't sure if it was bringing across the kind of area I wanted to be around her. But I think it looks fine in the end, so it doesn't really matter. The fairy's wings I decided to make turquoise and put holes in them, considering that she has literally got fiery hair that is there, right next to her wings. I thought it would only make sense if parts of her wings were broken, kind of. Plus, her star sign is busy keeping Scorpio in check, so she gets into a lot of fights with said creature. As such, her tunic is also torn a little bit, but only in like 2 places. I didn't go all the way with the tears and everything. I assume she's got some less broken clothes. Not all her clothes are broken. Anyways, she carries a belt with a bag and a pouch attached to it, as well as a quiver, of course, because she's an archer, she's going to need it. And she's also got one of those arm protector thingies that I don't know the name of around one of her arms to protect her from the bowstring when it snaps back. I spent a lot of time putting the shadow layer down on the horse body, so in the end, when it came to deciding what colour the horse body should be, I could only add a little bit of a layer onto it, since the horse body already had a lot of colour on it. I went with a brown colour, and the hooves and the little Sagittarius symbol, I just painted those over, because in the end I was going to do something that I like doing. You can probably guess what I will do to those areas. Yeah, I'm going to make them shiny, but that's for later. First, all I had to do was add some colour to the things and some extra shadows, because the shadow layer isn't going to be enough to bring out the shadows, but it does help with mapping out the shadows. So her tunic is going to be red. Her hair is obviously going to be mostly yellow with some orange curls in it that I just kind of painted as little squiggly lines, if you know what I mean. The belt and bags and all the other straps were coloured in a brown because they are made of leather, so that just kind of made sense to me. There are different coloured leathers, of course, but I wanted them to be brown. Then it was time for my favourite thing, metallic inks and metallic watercolours. First, silver for the stars and gold to connect them, and I even accidentally leave out one star because the sky was so dark in that spot that I couldn't tell that there was another star there. I noticed in the end, so, you know, I fixed that. And then there's this sort of dark grey-ish metallic watercolour, which I think was called Graphite in the Van Gogh series. And I used that for her hooves, as well as a little bit of light yellow metallic colour where the fire was shining at them. And I also used that same light yellow metallic watercolour to colour in some of the wings and any other areas that are going to be highlighted by the fire, because those are obviously going to be lighter. And some of the areas had gotten a little bit too dark for my liking, so just added a little bit of that shiny colour. Plus it would, you know, it would be shiny. I painted the tip of the arrow with a little bit of silver and the buttons with some gold watercolours, and then came time for my other favourite thing to do with these watercolours, splashing them around everywhere. For both stars and also some sparks, I did that. So I just kind of splashed around different, I think it was golds and a little bit of these bronze-ish colours, little copper colours, just kind of splashing them around to make stars and little sparks from the fire, and also to make everything a little bit more shiny and magical. And yes, it's probably not going to show up in the final result because I scanned those in and the scanner isn't great at picking up the right shininess. But speaking of that, let's take a look at the final result together now. I think this painting shows how important it is to get the sketch right before you do any inks or colours. Also, using references is hugely important. I used 2 separate ones for her pose alone and then another one for the background. Flipping the pose mentally though was very tough, but I am glad that I powered through that and finished her sketch properly before moving on to colouring and inking, which by far was easier. Even taking a break from a sketch and coming back to it to fix some things that I ended up seeing were maybe not drawn correctly, like I had to do with her human torso. That really, really pays off, just taking things slowly, you know, sometimes. She looks absolutely stunning because I paid so much attention to her pose before I inked or coloured her in. And I'm so proud of myself because drawing archers is not one of my strong points. I might be good at drawing horses, and I might have drawn horses before, but archers, I mean, I have tried before, but they weren't successes a lot of the time. The arms were very wonky. This time it went very well though. I am surprised by myself, to say the least. It went so much better than I had even hoped it would go. This is what practice is for, everyone. Practice so that you can get poses that you really want to do someday and then get them right. Now, if you have enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment something about centaurs or other zodiacs that you think are very interesting. Subscribe to the channel and check out my social media links down below. There's also a Twitch channel link down there in the description and a link to my Discord, you know, just a couple of selection of things that you can check out if you so choose. For the time being, I am the Witch of Paint and I shall see you all next Sunday. Bye! Yes, a great centaur has made it to the end of this video. Watch your bow, you know. Anyways, I'm sure you're here for the outtakes, so I'm not going to hold you up much longer. Have fun! Hello everyone, it is I, the Witch of Paint, and I've just realised I'm not wearing my headphones, so I'm not going to be able to actually hear myself. Okay. Wonderful start. The constellation has its oranges. Its origins. Oranges. Lovely oranges the constellation has. Nom nom nom. Achilles. How do you say it in English? I am losing my mind. Plus she's keeping busy, but plus she's busy keeping. That's what I was supposed to say.